Hey there, Icarus here. What if Sonic had a gun? Now, before we get started, I know what a few of you are probably thinking, but Icarus, we already have Sonic with guns. It's called Shadow the Hedgehog. And true, I do not wish to diminish the thorough cultural impact that title did indeed inflict on the psyche of many a young, impressionable mind, but there is a key difference here. You see, Shadow is red and black, and Sonic is blue. And he cracks jokes. Anyway, welcome to Sonic Lock and Load, a Doom mod that dares to dream the impossible, puts a gun in a blue speedster hedgehog's hands, and then just lets you loose, doming any and all demon in your path. But don't worry, Shadow can come too. And Amy. Oh god, Amy is terrifying. Jesus! That said, before you are truly unleashed on the unsuspecting demonic population of Mobius, you are unleashed here, in the hub environment, where you can collect rings to your heart's content, investigate a few switches that may potentially lead to a few secrets, accidentally open the wrong one, and oh Jesus Christ, why is it a fast cyber demon? Fuck, get it away, jeez, oh god! Oh, I'm glad that's over with. At least we can now safely explore this hub environment, and oh Jesus Christ, it's Spider Mastermind. Why is it all fire blue? Now you can tell it's still early days for Lock and Load when it comes to the roster of available levels, because if you travel far enough down the road here collecting these blue rings, eventually you'll just reach this kind of empty plaza with a fountain in the middle. I do imagine there's more to come, but before you get started with practically anything, you're going to have to run through this here opening level, which handily tutorializes the particular moves and quirks of each character depending on which one you've chosen. And believe me, some of these do have their own distinct quirks in terms of movement and traversal. Probably the most awkward to use out of all of them, for me personally, is a classic Sonic, because he's missing a lot of the things that make the traversal a lot smoother with other characters. For example, I believe practically every other character here has a double jump, or even in some cases an infinitely spammable wall jump, which proves to be extremely useful when it comes to the likes of getting yourself out of a pit or removing yourself from a body of water. Classic Sonic, however, does not enjoy such luxuries, but does have a method of getting out of a tricky situation. It's not the most intuitive thing. You've basically got to jump against the wall and hold the spin dash, and then release, which should catapult you up, but you gotta make sure you keep staring at the wall. If you look up, it kind of ruins the move. That said, for all my ragging on classic Sonic, I do feel like he has a fun idea behind his particular loadout. Guns in particular here may outwardly just look like standard Doom weaponry, but in the hands of classic Sonic, they fire at a phenomenally fast rate. It's kind of hilarious just seeing them tear through enemies. Of particular satisfaction, however, is Sonic's ability to ground slam, which you can do with other characters, but I don't think you can boop directly on Pinky's heads quite like you can with classic Sonic. There's something about this, especially being paired up with that Nashgore Gore mod, that just makes this, pretty fun to use. It's just a shame that general navigation with classic Sonic turns out to be such a frustration. But chances are that will not be the first thing you choose during the course of Sonic Lock and Load. You'll probably be drawn to the first option on the list, that being Modern Sonic, who has a much more enjoyable suite of moves at his disposal. Not only does he have those aforementioned weapons, which, believe me, we'll get to, he also has the ability to lock onto enemies, and when pressing a certain melee key, will just dash straight at them, ping off their foreheads, and in some cases deal quite a lot of damage. You can indeed chain this to quite a satisfying effect, and you've also got a few extra abilities such as a dash dodge, and if you're holding the sword, a boost that can accelerate you to ridiculous speeds. Even more so when you're supersonic. As for the weapons, the starting pistol ain't no joke. It's got a burst fire primary and a charged secondary that essentially lets off a railgun shot. Little awkward to use. It does require you to hold secondary and then fire with primary once it's fully charged. Missed a few shots by not entirely grasping that. But then moving on to the shotgun, it completely skips the standard pump action and just plants a double barrel in your hands. The primary pretty much does exactly what you imagine it would, whereas the secondary, It's not very good. It's kind of like a grenade lob, if anything, but it's extremely hard to keep on target, especially if you're strafing around enemies. After that, you got the shuriken crossbow, which is, yeah, I didn't use it much. Tremendously unsatisfying, and swiftly superseded by the Eclipse Blaster Mark V. If you're wondering what happened to all previous versions up to Mark IV, heck if I know, but it's largely a plasma gun with a high degree of knockback, but without the ability to just go full auto for as long as you like. This does overheat. I guess that's what it does after a period of time, and you'll gotta wait for it to return back to full charge before you start spewing plasma all over again. To compensate, it does have an alt fire that in fact heals you, I think up to the value of 150, but considering your health can go as high as 999 and enemies seldom pull their punches, doubly so when in large groups, I feel like it's probably missing a bit of balancing where you can spend as much as you like in terms of energy to health recoup. On that front, a lot of energy here for your weapons is exclusively acquired through the likes of blue rings and various boxes containing chaos energy, of which seem to come in various colors, but that doesn't define ammo type, rather, I guess the amount of ammo that the box itself contains. The rocket launcher is a friggin' menace, even more so than I'm accustomed to. You can pretty much semi-auto fire this thing. As fast as you want to click is as fast as it's going to fling out rockets, though it suffers from a similar kind of problem with the rocket lob from the SSG, wherein it doesn't always kind of go where you aim it, in particular when you're strafing. And then there's the secondary, which I'm struggling to understand because it basically detonates the rocket directly in front of the barrel. And, yeah, most of the time I don't have enough health to survive that kind of thing. Struggling to find a use case, I'll be honest. Anyways, I feel like I've been blue balling you long enough. It's time for that boy Shadow, who, in my opinion, is actually the best class in Sonic Lock and Load to play as. If I had my way, it would just be Shadow Lock and Load. Even though he shares a lot of the moveset with Sonic, there's just something about his particular layout that is oodles more satisfying. Maybe it's something to do with the fact that the lock-on attack is a lot more powerful, and secondly, somehow feels a little less cumbersome to pull off. It's bound to the jump, so if you're in midair and you got the lock on, you'll just zoom straight at them, and the resulting bounce gives you enough airtime to then more effortlessly chain that into the following enemy. Shadow still has the melee attack, but I'll freely admit, with how strong he feels in other areas, it feels almost somewhat redundant. He's also got a slightly cooler dash dodge in the form of the Chaos Snap, which personally I got more use out of, because when you're in a stationary position, it just jumps you straight up in the air. And that primes you for a much better chain into the Ground Slam, where you can then fling other enemies up and maybe catch them with another weapon. As I've said, there's just something about the layout here that is a lot more satisfying and a lot more focused in comparison to the other classes that are available here. And then there's the guns. They're just abjectly cooler looking, from the starting machine pistol to the auto shotty, and then the quad shotgun, because of course he has a quad shotty. But honestly, I'm getting ahead of myself, because Shadow also has in his possession the world's skinniest and most powerful shovel. I have zero context for this. I'm assuming it's some kind of Sonic meme reference, and at this stage, I'm happy to stay willfully ignorant. I just know if I go digging for context, there's a chance I could go down an entire rabbit hole that I will never recover from. Oh, and going back to moveset briefly, Shadow also has an objectively better boost move. Whereas Sonic needs to be wielding the sword in order to use it, and will take damage if he goes full force into a wall with his face, Shadow, in fact, suffers from no such problems, can trigger the boost anytime he likes, and even better, can use such speed to catapult enemies into a wall and occasionally just splat them. On the upper end of Shadow's weaponry, you've also got the likes of the double missile launcher, which in its primary form locks onto nearby enemies and delivers quite a hefty punch. It can be a little finicky in terms of what it chooses to lock onto. In a busy arena, for example, sometimes a rocket will just do a straight up U-turn and head for the nearest enemy, even if it's behind you. That's mostly why I tended to rely on the more dumbfire secondary. You aim it, you shoot it, you know where it's going, and it still delivers all of that seriously formidable punch that it has with its primary. Not kidding either, this thing can absolutely shred a cyber demon. Finally, we have the Green Chaos Emerald. This functions kind of like a mini BFG, and considering the amount of energy it chews up in order to fire one shot, I would have expected it to be a heck of a lot more powerful. It just isn't, and not enough to justify wasting the energy on when you've got so many other options to hand. Sure, it does recoup energy, which is handy in a pinch if you want to build it up for other weapons, and the secondary does recharge health much like the plasma gun, but it needs work. But yeah, I'd still categorically state that Shadow is the most fun class to play as in Sonic Lock and Load, but that shouldn't diminish the fun of playing as Amy. As previously mentioned, Amy is kinda terrifying. Her Pico Pico hammer will straight up one-shot most lower tier enemies, reducing them to a fine mulch, whereas higher tier enemies, say a Baron for example, will fold in as little as 2 taps to the head. Oh, and you can parry. Her hammer lets you parry projectiles. She's terrifying. In terms of additional movesets, she's not quite as mobile as Shadow or Sonic. She does have an extra low slide ability, which is sadly underutilized in the current form of Lock and Load. The most you really get here is being able to slide under this part of the hub, hit a Amy specific switch, and oh joy, it's the Fire Blue arena again. That said, this fight does give you ample practice with Amy's form of the plasma gun, which is an absolute friggin' destroyer in her hands. Unlimited stream of plasma, seems to deliver a 100% flinch rate, which turns out to be quite handy for this particular fight because this thing also has an unending stream of plasma, and you need to get close enough to boop it on the head with the hammer. Regardless, it is completely OP in almost every conceivable scenario, so it seems kind of appropriate that it chews through the energy like nobody's business. In terms of the rest of the weapons Amy has to hand, she's got a silenced pistol in a very fitting shade of hot pink, a shotgun, which I might add, much like every other shotgun here, is phenomenally accurate at range, with a railgun zoom scope alt that has a limited number of charges because it's just, again, an obliterator, an actual railgun, because why settle for one when you can have 2, and of course, for the girl who has everything, the rapid-fire chain gun rocket launcher. Features a multi-rocket alt, because of course it does. But yeah, it's an interesting dynamic after running through these classes, because Sonic is more like the default run-through, all of the standard mechanics. Shadow is very much the OP power fantasy class. Amy, certainly more considered. You gotta play a little bit more carefully with Amy, and then there's classic Sonic, which personally I didn't particularly vibe with, but I could see someone enjoying the challenge of attempting to use him. That said, I feel like Sonic Lock and Load could do with a serious amount of balance work, because honestly, in its current form, it is all over the shop. Now, that's not to say that it's not fun. It certainly is. All I'm saying is there's plenty of opportunity to fine-tune this and maybe whittle down some of that excess fat that isn't necessary. I mean, each of the characters here could stand to lose at least one weapon each tops. I don't think you'd really miss much. And between that, there's also some interesting little quirks that pop up during gameplay. For example, while playing as Sonic, if you run low on energy, resulting in a weapon unable to fire, it'll default back to the sword, and the first swipe with the sword will just be ridiculously powerful. I'm not sure if that's intentional, but yes, I abused the shit out of it. Same thing goes for a particular mechanic on Amy's side, where I actually discovered that she's got an infinite double jump. Yeah, you can absolutely trivialize levels with that. But all in all, I do not envy the task of trying to make this all feel more cohesive and work together in a more coherent way. Because, geez, across 4 different classes, making these levels feel like they have options that cater to the distinct quirks of these classes, that's no small task. That's going to be a lot of work. So yeah, at this point, it's no surprise that the levels in this current form of Lock and Load feel very general. You're largely going to be running through them progression-wise the same way, no matter what. And as for the combat encounters housed within, at the moment, it largely seems to be throw a shitload of enemies into a room and hope for the best. But one suggestion I would heavily advise the author of this taking on board is goddamn get rid of the hit scan enemies. Because, yeah, they're just a plain bad fit for this style of gameplay. And I already know that there's projectile-based alternatives within the mod as is. A few former humans have plasma gun bursts that they can fire at you instead of hit scan. And there's a Spider Mastermind variant that does a very similar thing. But regardless, there are still hit scan variants of each of those within the levels here. And, oh boy, are they not a lot of fun to deal with. As I've mentioned earlier on, though, still early days when it comes to the levels and the layouts and the encounter design. And even then, despite my gripes, I've had a fair bit of fun with Sonic Lock and Load. And if you too would like to have a little bit of fun with a hedgehog and a gun, you can do far worse than check out the link for it in the description below. But in any case, I hope you've enjoyed this video. Feel free to let me know what you thought in the comments. And if you really enjoyed yourself, why not consider supporting the channel via Patreon? From $1 a month, you too can join this esteemed list of names scrolling up screen and gain early access to videos when available. But until next time, this has been Mr. Icarus. Thank you very much for watching. Icarus out.